Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. There has been an expression of optimism by the officials that Israel and Palestinian resistance group Hamas are close to announcing a ceasefire agreement in Gaza that is of course being brokered by Egypt, Qatar and the United States of America. It is also being reported in the international media that this agreement has been reached in principle, and if everything goes right, this will be finalized within this particular week. Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesman Majid Al Ansari says, let me quote him, "A draft agreement has been handed to both Hamas and Israel, and major obstacles on key contentious issues between the two sides have been addressed." Unquote. US President Joe Biden says, let me quote, "The deal we have structured would free the hostages, halt the fighting, provide security to Israel, and allow us to significantly surge humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians who suffered terribly." Unquote. Also, the president-elect, the incoming president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, says his understanding is that there has been a handshake and they are getting it finalized. It is also pertinent to mention over here that a special envoy to the Middle East has been there during these mediation efforts, during these negotiations, also along with the officials of the incumbent administration of Joe Biden. Earlier, we saw after the November 5 election victory, the incoming president, Donald Trump, had repeatedly said that all hell will break out if the hostages being kept by Hamas in Gaza are not released by the time he takes over White House on 20th of January when the inauguration takes place. Also, international media is quoting Israeli and Hamas officials that the talks are in final stages, and Israeli officials saying that they are ready for a ceasefire. But another development on that particular front has happened despite the expression of this particular desire of implementation of a ceasefire by a number of officials from the Israeli side. The Israeli Prime Minister's office has said that contrary to reports, the Hamas organization has not yet returned to its response to the deal. We'll also be talking about that particular thing which has just came forth from the Prime Minister office of Israel. So far, the Gaza's health ministry says, owing to Israel's relentless bombardment on innocent people in Gaza, over 45,600 Palestinians have lost lives so far and over 100,000 have been wounded. This particular agreement, how high are the hopes and how cautiously the officials are being optimistic, how this particular ceasefire could be sustainable, are there any chances of reignition, and how this particular agreement is going to be implemented, and a number of important statements from all the officials which I have already mentioned also will be taking up for discussion. For that, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Mr. Rear Admiral retired Faisal Shah, senior analyst. Mr. Shah, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also on Skype at the same time, we are honored to be joined by Mr. G.R. Baloch, former ambassador. Mr. Baloch, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. At the same time on Skype, we are honored to be joined by Dr. Sabir Abu Maryam, Secretary General Palestine Foundation, Pakistan. He's also joining us on Skype. Dr. Abu Maryam, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Admiral Shah, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Dr. Abu Maryam. He's joining us on Skype. Dr. Abu Maryam, what are the hopes and how high are the hopes? How hopeful the Palestinians at this particular moment should be? Dr. Abu Maryam, if you could kindly unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, as you asked the hope, yes, we are hopeful, and because the ceasefire in Gaza Strip is the basic need of the humanities now. And now let me allow to start my conversation with the recent speech of the US Secretary Anthony Blinken, who has said that Hamas cannot be defeated by militarily. This is a true, and I am glad that the American government and the American responsibles they are now accepting this fact after they collapsed the Gaza Strip, they killed more than 50,000 people, but now after 15 months of the war, they are accepting the fact that the Hamas cannot be defeated by militarily. But one doubt is still alive. What is the doubt? Doubt is that the war, which they have been defeated in the battlefield, now they are trying to get some chance, some benefits through the dialogues, through the ceasefire, through the peace deal, through the truce. But we believe that if the demands of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian resistance may be completed, so I think this ceasefire will be positive and will be long time. But if the demands and the points which we raised from very first day, uh, all Israeli occupation forces should get out from the Gaza Strip. All the Palestinian, more than 1.5 million Palestinians are suffering in the Rafah crossing. They must come back to the Gaza Strip, reconstruction of the Gaza, and the most important thing is the deal of the prisoner deal, which is very important. And you also discuss in your intro that Trump also threatened due to the 33 prisoners, those are captive under the custody of Palestinian resistance movement Hamas. They are just thinking about their 33 people. They don't care about the Palestinian people. They do not care about the thousands and hundred people those are suffering in these days and these cold days and the winter days in the
Dr. Abu Majid, I get your
Rafah
point.
crossing and many other.
I get your point. You're of the view that Israel only cares about all those 33 hostages, not about any single Palestinian or how many hundreds are killed over there in Gaza. What about, there are international media reports also saying that there could be the release of 1,000 prisoners also in exchange for those 33 hostages. What about that?
Yes, yes. These prisoners, during this deal, which the Qatari foreign minister have spoken last day, this is the draft, and it is too early to decide or would discuss anything about the deal. Yes, Hamas and Palestinian Resistance Movement, Islamic Jihad, all have together give the more than 1,000 names. Those are under custody of the Zionist illegitimate regime since 2011. The last deal was in 2011, and now the second deal is happening in 2025. The 15 years they have suffering in the Palestinian, they have suffering in the Israeli prisons. So they gave the name. Yes, if this deal will be occurred, will be happen,
Yeah,
yes, it is good.
Prisoners in exchange for 33 hostages being held in Gaza by Palestinian resistance group Hamas. Do you consider a considerable feat on the part of the Palestinians that they will be getting 1,000 people back in exchange for 33?
Yes, I do consider, but the problem is that these prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, what they have done, they are innocent. But the Zionists, those are in the custody of Palestinian resistance. Most of them, they are Israeli forces. They are serving in the Israeli forces, the Israeli occupation forces. They are working. They are serving in the intelligence forces. So we should differentiate between the innocent people and like the occupied forces. So if once again we are hopeful and we hope and we believe that if the deal will be properly, we make sure and everything will be on as per deal. So it's mean the victory with the Palestinian people. This is the hope because until in this draft, Israel did not question out about the ruling of the Gaza Strip, who will rule in future. But the last agreement,
This
the
particular
last
point
draft,
is a very
the
important
last
point, Dr. Abu Maryam. Let me go towards Mr. J.R. Baloch. Mr. Baloch, now this particular agreement, the outline that is available at the international media is reporting it. It is going to happen in 3 phases. The first is going to be 6-week long, and the return of those 33 hostages of Israel from the Palestinian resistance group Hamas, and also in exchange for 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. This particular phase-wise implementation of this particular agreement, do you think it's going to be feasible as far as the sustainability in the longer term is concerned, or are you also cautiously optimistic, as Majid Al-Ansari, the foreign ministry spokesman of Qatar, is saying that we are hopeful, but let's how the things go about?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was the word I wanted to actually use, that probably each one of us has to be cautiously optimistic. Because if you look at the entire, this phase, like for the last 15 months, since the carnage started by Israelis, they have crossed all the humanitarian red lines. They have crossed all the legal and international law red lines. They have crossed all the red lines of behaviors of state. So I think we have one person, Netanyahu, who has been there, who has been manipulating the entire Israeli state, as well as the state, the US decision-making centers. Now, I think it's, while we are being cautiously optimistic, at the same time, I think we, when we look at the entire situation and we make our hopes and our opinions, I think the most important thing is that whether this will be a just peace, will it be a sustainable peace? I think this is where the direction of this agreement should move. And I think that is the entire emphasis of Hamas and the Palestinian side, that it should not be a truce for 2 months. It should not be a truce till the time the people held by Hamas are given back. And again, we are back to the square one, and on one pretext or the other, Israel reignites its genocide. So I think most important thing, which I think is delaying, or which could actually delay the implementation of this agreement, would be the foundations on which a sustainable and a just peace process must start. It is not an end by itself, but it is just a beginning of that process. And I think this is what each one of the parties involved, especially the Arab parties involved, they wanted. So whether the Israeli government wants it or not, but definitely Israeli people want it. Basically, the present regime, which is a maniac person leading a regime which is kind of warmonger, they're totally diverse from what actually the Israelis, they think. So I think even you must have heard some of the comments coming in that this may be the beginning of the end of the Zionist enterprise. So there are so many points of view coming in from Israel itself. So I think we should then, while we hope that this process starts, but we have to make sure that whatever truce and is the first beginning, and the peace agreement has to be sustainable. It has to be just. It has to have a path towards a sustainable peace and ultimate reconstruction, rebuilding of Gaza, and ultimately, of course, moving towards the establishment of the Palestinian state. Yeah,
Mr. Baloch. Admiral Shah, are there any, how hopeful firstly you are about this particular agreement in terms of its sustainability, going through different phases and then in the longer run? And also, do you see any sort of procedural hurdles in the implementation of this agreement as far as Israel is concerned, its cabinet, its Supreme Court, and its opposition?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jawad. I think as far as optimism for conclusion of this deal is concerned, I think I'm optimist that this deal is going to be concluded soon, because there are so many factors that are governing this deal. First of all, there is by and large international pressure that has been going on for last few months to stop this genocide in Gaza, to stop this war in Gaza and come to some peace deal between the warring parties. More than that, there is a US factor playing and expediting this process, because the outgoing president and for the incoming president, for both of them, it's a win-win situation. The outgoing President Biden would like to have this feather in his cap that at the end of his term he could get the deal done. And as President Trump has said, has stated and claimed, and he has even directed that before he takes over, the prisoners, the hostages should be released. So all of them would not be released, but at least the deal would be done and some of them would be released. Then there is an internal pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu from the families of those hostages who are with Hamas, that something has to be done to get them released. There are old age hostages also, there are women also, there are children also, and there are fighters, soldiers, Israeli soldiers and intelligence operatives also there. So there has been a pressure from there also. Then there is a war fatigue on Israel also. I mean, they are fighting on so many fronts for the last 15 months, albeit with the help of US and its allies, but still it has been sort of hostage sort of situation for Israelis also, because they are also trapped in their territory, and there is fighting going on all along all around their borders. Then there is scarcity of commodities in Gaza. I mean, there is shortage of food, fuel, water, medical aid, health facilities. So people in Gaza desperately want this deal to be done, and also they want their hostages to come back to them, although they will be allowed to go to their homes, but there are no homes there. They have all been razed to the ground. So all these factors, if you consider, I think there is a very vivid sign that this deal is going to be concluded in 1 or 2 days, and it will be implemented initially. Now, the foremost objective of Israel and US and its allies is basically to get Israeli hostages back from Hamas. And as soon as they are back, we are not certain this deal will be honored by Israel or not. We have the precedent that a similar deal was undertaken between Israel and Hezbollah a few months back. And while the deal was signed, Israel continued its atrocities against Lebanese in Lebanon, against Hezbollah, Hezbollah fighters. Then came Syria debacle, and it went inside Syria also and occupied so much of territory over there. Even today in Gaza, when the negotiators are sitting in Qatar, 61 people have been killed during last 24 hours. So what kind of deal is being negotiated, that on one hand you have engaged your opponents on the table, and on the other hand you are killing people in Gaza?
You already, Admiral Shah, you already mentioned a number of pressures. The international pressure we've seen during this 15-month war by Israel, the brutality over the innocent people in Gaza. There has been a lot of international pressure. There has been a lot of international censure through United Nations General Assembly resolutions. Also, the kind of injunctions at the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court. But why now, after 15 months? Don't you think the second pressure that you've mentioned, the US pressure of incoming new administration, rather than the outgoing administration, it has played a pivotal role. The internal pressure, the third type of pressure that you already mentioned in your take, was already there since the captives were taken hostage and their heirs were protesting right at the outset. So out of these three pressures, don't you think the second pressure of the US incoming administration played the pivotal part in this particular agreement if it is reached and announced?
Absolutely right. I think that is the foremost pressure right now on both sides, because President Trump has clearly mentioned that all hell will break loose if this deal is not concluded and hostages are not released.
Let me correct something over here. He said that if the captives held in Gaza are not released by the time his inauguration takes place on 20th of January.
Yes.
So by and large, what we understand from this particular threat, it was directed towards the Palestinian resistance group who was holding those captives. So why would Israel agree to this particular deal at this particular point? What's in there for them? Or for Benjamin Netanyahu, who didn't succumb to any sort of pressure earlier, what does he get if he agrees to this particular ceasefire before inauguration? Do we understand that his objectives that he set at the very outset or the start of his offensive in Gaza have been achieved?
You're right. If you look back during these 15 months, I think it was early last year when his advisors started advising him that we had achieved our objectives and we must not continue with this campaign. But he continued with this war and made it not Israel's war but Benjamin Netanyahu's personal war, because he had some political objectives to be achieved. Now that all objectives have been achieved and this is no more a war for the last few months, in my point of view, this has been purely a genocide carried out by Israel. In war you have two warring parties. For the last few months, the resistance movements have been weakened, their allies have been weakened, and there has not been significant resistance to Israel. So there is no point going on with that.
What about this Antony Blinken statement, which Dr. Abu Maryam also mentioned earlier in his take, that we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new fighters as it has lost. That is the recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war. I mean, what do you understand of this? I mean, you already used a term, that war fatigue, that Israel over the last 15 months is going through that particular fatigue. By looking at this particular statement by Antony Blinken, do you think that Palestinian resistance group Hamas has also suffered the same phenomenon of war fatigue? Because they have recruited as much as they have lost.
Okay. The resistance movements or the insurgencies, they seldom die if they have their roots in the population. So they, as long as they are connected with the population, their idea is supported by the local populace, they get recruits from the local population, and in asymmetric warfare, not much of training is required actually. So Israel has suffered fatigue, war fatigue also. Hamas has also suffered war fatigue. Hamas has been weakened also, but Hamas is still there and will remain there actually. So even if this deal is concluded, Hamas will remain there. It will give respite to Hamas also. It will give respite to Israel also. And if one of the warring factions, one of the warring parties resumes fighting, the other will also be ready.
Right.
So
I get your point. Admiral Shah, I get your point. Dr. Abu Maryam, coming back to you, you already talked of the Palestinian demands. One of those is that Israeli occupation forces completely out of Gaza, if I got that correctly. But there has been talk of these proposals in this particular agreement, talk of a corridor where the Israeli military presence is going to be, and also a buffer zone along the border between Gaza and Israel. So how do you think if that particular buffer zone or a narrow strip along the Gaza and Egypt border happens to be under this particular agreement, how do you think that is going to satisfy with that particular demand of Palestinians of the removal of Israeli military from there?
Yes, first of all, the question is that will Israel remain committed on this agreement or on this deal? This is a very big question. And we have a long history of the Zionist regime. They always make agreements and violate. Even in Lebanon, they have an agreement for the 60 days, but unfortunately till now they have violated more than 24 times in the southern Lebanon. The same situation in Gaza Strip. If the Zionist forces will exist in the south of the Gaza, it's mean the tension and the problem is still remain. And if there is no any guarantee in this agreement that Israel will be implement anything in the second and third phase or not. So who is the guarantor? And if we are talking about, for example, like some pressures on the Zionist regime, there are many pressures. Yes, you are right, and our distinguished guest in your studio, he speaks very good. He speaks very proper pressures, and one pressure is this opposition. Now, the Zionist entity has facing Etmar Ben Goer, who is very harsh politician in the Zionist entity. He is opposing this deal, and some others are also opposing this deal. This is another problem. The problem inside Hamas, how Hamas will accept if the Israeli forces will remain, and there is the demand. So I think everything is too early and too early and before the time. I think once again, I would like to say that American government and the Zionist illegitimate regime, they both are trying to get some achievements through the table talks, through the dialogue, through this truce in the first phase. And I am not hopeful about the second and third phase. Yes, because they have long history, because they have lost the war. Once again, the Palestinian resistance gave a very good and very excellent performance in last 3 months. If you can collect some statistics, so we have some reports from the Israeli media, the Israeli channel 14, Israeli Yom, Haaretz, and others. They are quoting some statistics that more than 400 Israeli occupied forces have been killed in last 3 to 4 months. And last 3-4 days, we are witnessing that on daily basis. The Palestinian resistance is performing in an excellent way. So this is the main reason as Israel want to stop Hamas and want to create.
Point, Dr. Abu Maryam, your quick take regarding, as you already mentioned, Ben Gvir's statement. Let me quote that. This move is our only chance when he has threatened Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to quit his government. This move is our only chance to prevent the deal's execution and prevent Israel's surrender to Hamas after more than a year of bloody war in which more than 400 IDF soldiers fell in the Gaza Strip, and to ensure that their deaths are not in vain. Now, by looking at this particular statement, now whenever we get into the discussion of this particular situation that has developed there in Gaza since 7th of October 2023, majority of the analysts are of the view it is because of Benjamin Netanyahu's political interest that he has prolonged the war. But if now he's going to strike this particular agreement with Palestinian resistance group Hamas, why this opposition from within Israel? Do we understand that this particular policy of disproportionate bombardment, this genocide, is not solely resting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? It prevails across the board within Israeli ranks.
Shall I speak?
Please go ahead. Dr. Abu Maryam, please go ahead. This is for you.
Yes, because there are many reasons. As earlier I told you, I said that Israel have a history that never bound on any agreements. The opposition. This is the one point. The other point is that shall be quoted that what is his name? The Lieberman. Lieberman also, Lieberman also says that if the Netanyahu's policies will remain until 2026, so it means Israel no more exists in the occupied Palestine, and this is the main reason. This is the main reason that you explained. Netanyahu is doing for only for himself because he wants to he is trying to save himself. He doesn't care about the Palestinian, about the other people. He needs his government remain uh, until he finish everything. Gaza has been.
Dr. Abu Maryam, I get your point. Mr. G.R. Baloch, what's your understanding? Which out of these 3 or 4 pressures already mentioned by Admiral Shah have actually worked as far as Israeli Prime Minister ready to agree with Hamas on this particular deal, which has been structured, of course, as per the statement of Joe Biden? What does Israeli Prime Minister at this particular point in time get out of it? What's there for him?
Yeah, so Jawad, I think the combined pressure of the outgoing US president and the incoming president, they have tried to, they have made some declaratory announcements. So that could be one, which is, I think, more effective. But my worry is beyond that, as was also mentioned by our other speakers, that Netanyahu's only objective is to remain in power and save himself, because if he, which he will definitely, he will be the, I think the moment there's a ceasefire, even if for a few months, there will be some change in Israel. So he wants to save himself, his power, not Israel, not the political party. He doesn't represent now any political party, he himself, because he's all, these extremists are with him. So I think the pressure seems to me the combined pressure of the US, the incoming and outgoing president, and also I think psychologically the people of Israel are in fact, there was reports that a record number of Israelis have left their country and they've gone back to their original, because I think, as we all know, that more than 90% Israelis, they have dual nationalities. So they have gone back. So there is some kind of exodus from Israel. The new investment has completely come to a halt, and its economy will definitely has been affected kind of drastically. And so no new investments are coming to Israel.
Mr. Baloch, do you also consider that Israel has suffered war fatigue, as already mentioned by Admiral Shah? And looking at that particular statement by Secretary Blinken, that reassessed that Hamas has recruited almost as many fighters as it has lost. That is the recipe for an enduring insurgency or perpetual war. So has that phenomenon also worked similarly or equally as far as Palestinian resistance group Hamas is concerned, the war fatigue?
Yeah, I think war fatigue, we are saying in a more technical terms. I think more than that is that this is a symmetrical war. It was also brought out between a resistant movement, a movement for freedom and liberation. Hamas is not an organization. It's a name of an aspiration of people. It's an idea. It's an ideology for their proving their existence, the Palestinian identity as a nation, as a people as at stake, and that is what they are defending. While Israel has a superficial or an artificial notion of secure Israel. So the two things are entirely different. If so, how many Hamas soldiers they will kill. I mean, Secretary Blinken's statement verifies this very big notion that Israel has failed to defeat, at least failed in its major war aims. That was to eliminate Hamas, to get its hostages, and of course secure Israel as for the future. On three accounts, Israel has not achieved any of the war aims. That being the case, I think very well we can say that while Israel has lost the war.
Right, Mr. Baloch, I'll come back to you. Please stay with us. Admiral Shah, there has been, there are reports regarding the Israeli military's presence along the Egypt and Gaza border, that very narrow corridor. Also, the establishment of a buffer zone along the Israeli-Gaza border. So, keeping that particular demand, which Dr. Abu Maryam also mentioned, that Palestinians want the complete removal of Israeli military's presence from the Gaza Strip, do you think by these 2 points they are going to be ultimately contentious later on to the implementation of this particular agreement?
Yes, if you see, I think in Syria also, Israel actually talked about a buffer zone, and that's why they captured some territory inside Syria around Golan Heights to make it a buffer zone, so that they can actually monitor and control all the activities, and they should have the forewarning of any happening, so that they have quick reaction. So that is the same philosophy that they are going to implement here in Gaza also. So there will be permanent presence of Israeli forces along Gaza, inside Gaza, and that will actually put everything under their nose, under their eyes and ears, and so that they may not be surprised again as they were surprised back on 7 October 2023. So obviously, when they have their boots on ground in Gaza, permanently stationed over there in the form of buffer zone or whatever you call it, there will be.
Do you think it's going to be acceptable in the longer run for the Palestinians?
Absolutely not. I think Palestinians are not going to accept that, because they expect Israel to withdraw completely and hand them over their land to them. Not only that, Palestinians expect that this deal should actually start serious considerations and negotiations on two-state solution. So if that doesn't happen, this fighting will erupt again in some point in time in future.
Right, Admiral Shah, now we've also seen there are multiple international media reports that are suggesting that Israeli officials have said that these talks are in final stages and they are ready for a ceasefire, and they will implement as soon as it is announced. But in the most recent development, we have seen that Israeli Prime Minister's office said that Hamas has not returned to its response to the deal. Do you think this sort of a statement at this particular point in time could serve as a delaying tactic?
I think Hamas, the reports from Hamas side are also positive, and their spokesman has also said that negotiations have been going on in the right direction. We are talking seriously to each other, and they are also, I think, looking at the deal seriously. But obviously, once they sign the deal, they will have to review it very carefully and cautiously for the future of Palestinians and Gaza. So I don't think that Israeli Prime Minister office is intending to delay it. I think they also like to have it done, because as mentioned by other panelists also, that Israel has the history of breaching the deals. So it's very easy for them to breach this deal also. But at this point in time, I think there is so much of pressure on them that they would like to conclude this deal.
Again,
by all
going back to
means.
those pressures that you already mentioned, the internal pressure. You already mentioned that it is one of that factor that has been at play that has made Netanyahu to go for making this particular deal. What about this particular statement that I've already quoted of Ben Gvir? He has threatened to quit the government if Benjamin Netanyahu goes making this particular deal, and he has also termed it Israel's surrender to Hamas.
Yeah, but I think he has also invited finance minister to follow the suit and threatened Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to leave the interim government and make it a minority government. But the overall opposition leader has supported the deal, and there are intentions from the opposition that even if Benjamin Netanyahu's party remains a minority, they would not like to throw it or pull it away, pull it down from the government. They would like to sustain it for the sake of success of this deal.
Right, Dr. Abu Maryam, one very important question. When we talk about the implementation, the sustainability of the first two phases of this particular agreement, if everything goes right and all the parties stick to the outline, what has been agreed, what about the third phase, the reconstruction of Gaza? How would the world look at that particular thing? How would the reconstruction happen? Who is going to take the onus of that?
First two phases will be done successfully. I wish it should be. So in the third phase, the reconstruction must be by the Palestinian people, by the Palestinian, with the Palestinian will and wish, which is Hamas only. Hamas is representing the Palestinian people, no any other government, because the other government has been failed, and Palestinian are never asking about the two-state solution, as they are demanding to evacuate the all Israeli occupied forces from the Gaza Strip. It doesn't mean that they are seeking two-state solution. Palestinians are seeking right of return to their homeland, Palestine. All those Palestinians, those were being forcefully expelled, forcefully exiled in the 1948, 1967, and now, after again in 2023, now they are in the Rafah crossing. They all are demanding to go back to their homeland, which is Palestine. So, as the panelist says, that mostly Zionist, the Zionist citizens have dual nationality. Yes, they have dual nationalities. Everyone should go to their home. Palestinian must come to their homeland, and the Zionists must go to their homeland, Europe, France, and anywhere. So the third phase must be accomplished and deal by the local Palestinian people and their political party. And Hamas is the political party of the Palestinian people who has ruled in 2006.
So, Dr. Abu Maryam, when you talk about the reconstruction of Gaza Strip, the kind of proportion, the scale of damage and destruction since 7th of October 2023, the world has witnessed, this reconstruction is, of course, going to cost a lot. Where that funding is going to come from? Who owes this reconstruction?
First of all the Muslims states and the Muslim countries should step forward and fulfill the hands of the Palestinian people to the aid, to the reconstruction.
It's a moral responsibility of the Muslim countries. What about Israel, who has actually destroyed the Gaza Strip since 7th of October? I mean, shouldn't there be a mechanism that should actually force Israel to pay in damages for this reconstruction?
I think if we will have any kind of decision or agreement like this, even Israel is not bound about the ICJ and ICC decision. So who will decide? This is the problem. And the American government, let me say that the American government is the part of the problem. No one is guarantor regarding the Israel. Israel is untrustful, untrusty. a entity.
I get your point, Admiral Shah. Your closing comment. Who should ideally be paying for this damage that's been caused in last 15 months?
Ideally, it should be those who have caused the devastation, but it never happens. The contractors, the money, the material, the expertise, the supervisors, the labor, they will all be those people who were in Iraq earlier, who were in Afghanistan also. So it will be a big, business for same people who have been doing it in other countries also.
Mr. Rear Admiral retired Faisal Shah, senior analyst, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for being with us in the show tonight. Really appreciate that. On Skype, we were joined by Dr. Sabir Abu Maryam, Secretary General, Palestine Foundation, Pakistan. Dr. Abu Maryam, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We were also joined by Mr. Baloch, former ambassador. Mr. Baloch, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.